Principles of finance, a la shmup. Planned obsolescence, the dumbest idea in history. All right, well, for many companies, inventory is a huge part of their asset base. It comprises a giant share of their capital or financial resources. It's a mess to manage all that inventory, store it, track it, and God forbid, return it to its manufacturer if something goes wrong. Well, think about the production nightmare called the car industry in 1970. Back then, some geniuses created this thing that would become the death of the dominance of the American car in the world. It was called planned obsolescence. And just like it sounds, the manufacturers who actually graduated colleges and earned degrees purposely made cars suck. Huh? Were they spies planted to destroy the evil capitalists from the West? No, they were homegrown. The financial managers at the time had the arrogance that the U.S. auto industry was so powerfully dominant that nobody in the world would ever catch up and compete with us. We had so much room ahead of the Japanese, Korean, and German car makers that, well, we could afford to make our cars worse. The problem with American cars at the time, well, they were lasting too long. Instead of a 10 to 12 year cycle from birth to death, the managers of GM, Ford, and the others thought that if we created cars that died after 6 or 7 years, well, then people would be forced to buy more of them, or rather buy them more often. And you can bet that the legions of mechanics, Midas muffler shops, and other repair areas were delighted with this notion and highly supportive of planned obsolescence. Unfortunately, the U.S. managers who made these decisions didn't get out much, at least not to Japan or Korea. And you know what happened? Well, look out the window over your parking lot. See only American cars out there? Yeah, not so much. Well, the rest is history because yada yada yada, foreign competitors smoked us a decade later with cars that were reliable, cheaper, and lived for decades. The Japanese manufacturers were relentless in their process of managing inventory, and unlike the environment in the US, where the supply of parts and services was a free-for-all, highly competitive market, in Japan things were much more organized and cooperative. One magic bullet invented by the Japanese in this era was this whole notion of just-in-time inventory, or JIT. The basic idea was that instead of storing 5,000 sets of car tires in an assembly factory that would last 3 months, get lost, cost warehousing, cost infrastructure, space, etc., JIT manufacturers would store a dozen sets. The tires would sit 20 feet from the car, and each day the tire distributor would bring a new load. The tires arrived just in time to be installed. That way, if demand suddenly changed, well, the factory wasn't left with 2,000 sets of tires that fit a car nobody wanted to buy anymore. Adjustments to inventory in JIT manufacturing happened daily, if not hourly, so mistakes were dramatically minimized. JIT is a lot of things, but for our purposes, it's just that, great inventory management. Think about what this adjustment then does to the metrics we've laid out so far. If sales are $10 billion a year and our inventory costs just went from $2.5 billion to $250 million, our turnover went from 4x to 40x. And more importantly, think about the $2.5 billion of inventory minus the $250 million of inventory equals $2.25 billion in capital that would have been used to just own that inventory. Well, now it's freed up. Suddenly, we get a whole lot better management as massive excess capital and the ability to build new products and build new features and buy supply chains and buy competitors and market and throw a really big Christmas party, well, the whole 9 yards. Well, the combination of planned obsolescence mapped against foreign innovation like just-in-time inventorying nearly killed the U.S. auto industry in the 80s. At least today, we have Tesla.